Some people don't lose relationships. They just slowly disappear from them.
It's not something that happens with big arguments. It happens in the quiet moments. Maybe a reply to a text that takes a little longer. A bit of emotional distance you can't quite name. A conversation that just sort of loses its warmth.
And in this story, we meet someone named Daniel. And Daniel, he didn't know he was the one pushing people away. He honestly thought he was just protecting himself from being abandoned.
So, Daniel's life, it wasn't one of, dramatic loneliness. If you look from the outside, you'd see friends, you'd see old photos, memories of laughter that felt so real at the time. But his present, it had this strange emptiness to it. And it wasn't because nobody cared. It was because, somehow, nobody could ever seem to stay close for very long.
It felt like every meaningful relationship he had ended in the exact same way. Not with a bang, not with some big moment where things fell apart, but just with a slow, emotional fading. And what was left behind was this really confusing silence.
And he just couldn't understand it. And it makes me wonder if you've ever felt that too. That quiet dissolving. Why is it that some relationships, the ones that feel like they really matter, why do they just seem to disappear?
Well, the answer, it seems, wasn't about what was happening between him and other people. It was something deeper, something inside of him. A fear that was so quiet he couldn't even hear it himself.
And if you could listen to that deepest, quietest part of his mind, you might hear this one belief, this hidden conviction that says, if someone truly knows me, all of me, they will eventually leave.
So his mind, just trying to keep him safe in its own way, it developed this quiet survival strategy. But it didn't feel like a strategy. It didn't even feel like fear. It felt like being mature, like being independent. It just felt like he was protecting his peace. But really, it was something else. A pattern that actually has an aim. And it's not an aim to diagnose anybody, but just to help us understand. It's a way of surviving that so many of us learn, without ever realizing we made a choice.
Sometimes it's called preemptive abandonment. It's that quiet retreat, that slow emotional departure. It's a strategy that's designed to protect you from a pain you believe is definitely coming, no matter what. So it's not really about rejecting love. It's about trying to manage the overwhelming fear of losing it.
And here's the most painful part of it all, the deep irony. The very things we do to protect ourselves from being left are often the exact things that create that distance in the first place. That attempt to feel safe, it ends up creating the very outcome that we're terrified of.
Let's think about it from the other side for a second. From the side of someone like Emma. As she got closer to Daniel, that hidden fear inside him just woke up. And he started to pull back. Not because he didn't care, but because he cared so much it felt terrifying. But Emma, she couldn't see his fear. All she felt was him disappearing. And eventually she had to leave too, because there was this emotional wall she just couldn't get through.
So it makes you wonder, where does a fear like this even come from? For Daniel, and for so many others, it wasn't from some big, obvious trauma. It was something much quieter. It grew in the soil of a childhood where love and emotional support just felt inconsistent.
As a kid, you learn really fast, and he learned that needing comfort was risky. Sometimes it would be there, and other times it just wouldn't. So he adapted. He learned how to be self-contained, easy to take care of. He learned to manage all of his biggest feelings by himself. And back then, that was a brilliant way to survive.
And so his whole nervous system learned this fundamental lesson, that predictable loneliness somehow felt safer than the unpredictable heartbreak that might come from real connection. Being safe became more important than being happy.
And that leads to this really quiet, but maybe really important question. What if that anxiety that we sometimes feel in a safe, loving relationship, what if it's not a red flag about the relationship at all? What if it's just the sound of a nervous system learning a totally unfamiliar feeling, the feeling of safety? So, how does something like this start to shift? It doesn't seem to happen with some big, dramatic change. It seems to begin with just a quiet awareness, the courage to finally be seen, even if it's only by yourself at first.
For Daniel, this happened one night, just scrolling through old text messages, and he saw it, a pattern. In every single relationship that faded, he could see someone trying to get closer, while he was quietly, subtly becoming just a little harder to reach. And for the first time, he didn't feel abandoned. He felt responsible.
And that's where something new can begin.
Not with trying to fix yourself, but with these small, terrifying acts of emotional honesty. Having the courage to just say the thing that's true. Something like, I notice that I sometimes pull away when I start to care too much.
Or even just, I really want to stay close, even when a part of me feels like running. And you start to see that these aren't admissions of weakness. These are the words that actually make a real connection possible.
Because it turns out the truth is, people don't need us to be perfect. They just need emotional access. They just need to know what's actually happening inside of us, even when it's messy, even when it's just fear.
And in time, Daniel really saw the full, painful picture. The goal of his fear was always to prevent the pain of being left, but its real outcome, its actual result, was to guarantee his own emotional isolation. And he started to learn that the goal isn't to find someone who you're 100% sure will never leave you. That kind of certainty, it just doesn't exist. The real journey is about building trust. Trust in yourself.
Trust that you are worthy of connection, right now, just as you are, even with the knowledge that some people might eventually leave. Because allowing yourself to be seen, truly seen, it means the love you finally do experience is real. And that, well, that changes everything.